What the point of Aden was, I really don't know. Who we were supposed to be fighting, the locals, I don't know. But I mean, they'd be there in the day farming and shooting at you in the evening when it got dark. So you really didn't, and as I say, who the actual enemy was or what it was all about, I still don't know. I couldn't really say.
Obviously everything was rationed. I forget how many eggs we were supposed to have, but very often you couldn't get any. Sweets were rationed, and you know, you had sort of small amounts of margarine, and you know, we just have to make do with what we'd got.
As far as I can remember, you know, we had very limited sugar. What you don't have, you don't miss, I think, sometimes.
When I look back, I just don't know how my mother managed to feed us all with what they had. I mean, it was so little. And she was very strong. She wouldn't have anything to do with black market. She would not buy anything that over the top, rations, and that was it. But of course there was fruit in the garden, vegetables in the garden. The lady next door had chickens, so we had eggs occasionally. And but apart from that, no, we lived on rations.
Like fruit was something that I can't remember having as a child.
Because, well, yes, we did get sweets, because Mum used to stop our sweet ration from September. We never had any sweets. And then when it was near Christmas, she would get the whole ration. And then my brother and I would have it between us for Christmas.
When I got married in 1948, I had to have what they called dockets to get furniture. We could only get so much furniture because everything was so scarce that we had to either get a bed or a chair or something. I was evacuated because parents were asked if they would send their children away because of the bombing. And I went to Devon, where we were greeted by the local people in the community centre. And they sort of picked out who they wanted to look after for the rest of the war or whenever. It was sort of an adventure to start with. I mean, I was 12 and we was quite immature, and it was like going out to the seaside, which it was. I mean, we were right by the sea, and we went to school there, but we had to fit in with different classrooms because, you know, obviously there wasn't a lot of room, and otherwise they used to take us for walks and one thing another so that to keep us amused.
We didn't think really very much of it, but surprised at having to leave Mum behind. I remember getting on the train and saying to my brother, "Where are we going?" And he said, "I don't know." And we landed up in Eastleigh, and there was a crocodile of us. You know, we all queued up, and we all followed this person with a clipboard, and we were walking down roads, and they were knocking on doors and saying, "How many can you take? You know, how many?" So that was it. You know, you went off, wherever you were in the queue, you went off to that particular place. We landed up, we were with a couple who were very, very nice, very charming, very nice to us, very caring. One thing I do remember is that they had a daughter, and she was a maid at a house in the New Forest, and it was the captain of the HMS Hood's house. I don't know why I remember it, but I do remember that.
I was there 2 years, and I had to leave school at 14, so I had to return to London at the height of the Blitz, which defeated the object of being evacuated. But the worst part of the air raids was the flying bomb, which was towards the end of the war. It was doodlebugs, we called them, and they had a certain engine and you could hear them come over, and as soon as the engine cut out, it used to drop and of course blow up what was ever underneath it. And it was quite frightening, really. You never knew where they were going to drop, and our house was damaged a bit because of the bomb that dropped on the other side of the road, and we had the railway the back of us where all the troops and guns used to come along. My friend lived opposite the other side of the railway, and unfortunately a bomb hit her house and she was killed with her mother and brother. But we used to try and do things, you know, as much as we could, and when we went to the pictures, we used to often see a notice come up to say the siren had been sounded and you could please yourself whether you left the cinema or got a bomb drop on you.
It was horrific, the noise. That's all I can remember, is when bombs came down and we were in the shelter. It sort of, well, just shook. But one night, the sirens went off and my two older sisters took me out and we ran across the road, and we could hear a plane very low. So now, in your older life, it come over the channel sort of thing and over the Solent, and it was just firing all along. You could hear it behind. And my little legs between my sisters never reached the ground.
They were quite frightening, but being so young, we didn't realise how horrific it all was. We sort of accepted it as part of our life because we really didn't remember anything else. And you just got on with it. I mean, my mum used to come and shake us out of bed and run down to the air raid shelter and tuck us up and hope that we would get back to sleep again. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't. And then when the air raids were finished, she had to pick us up and take us up back to our bedrooms. I don't know how she coped, actually, night after night.
Our house was hit, but it was the two houses opposite were bombed and two men were killed in there. And of course, when we came out of the shelter, to see our curtains hanging on the tree, front door at the top of the stairs. So we had to live in the school for about 10 days while presumably temporary repairs were done. Well, I presume when I look at it now, you know, it was sort of astonishment that, wow, and nobody was in there because we'd all gone over to the shelter. So that was one thing, that we were all safe.
We'd landed in Dunkirk, where all the little ships were being sent over to try and get all the forces off of the beaches because they were all stranded, and because they were being fired on and everything else. So they sent us, all the little ships, if you had a boat, you went over over to Calais or Dunkirk and helped get some of the men off the beaches. I seem to remember when you saw the soldiers coming back from, you know, where people had picked them up. The soldiers came back and they sort of looked really haggard and really sort of stressed out.
The only thing I do remember about D-Day, but I didn't know it was D-Day at the time, was my brother and I used to go cycling around, and there were lots of lorries and things with these big boiler things on them. We didn't know what they were. We called them Smoky Joes. But they used to apparently produce smoke. And so if you wanted to obliterate part of the country, they would put these around, and the planes, the Luftwaffe, couldn't see what they were bombing. Well, we would go out cycling, my brother and I, and there were these lorries that were all around, they were everywhere. They were around HMS Collingwood, wherever you went, they were there. So we would go by and we'd say, good night, and they'd say, you get home because it's getting dark. Go on, you're too young to be out. Off you go. And good night. They were very friendly, very nice. There's about 3 or 4 of them on each lorry. And then one morning I got up to go to school and there was nothing. It had all gone. Everything had gone. It was like they'd never been there. And I particularly remember that because I couldn't understand it. However, my brother, being that bit older than me, when I said, what's happened? What's happened? He said, well, 2 or 3 days ago there was an invasion. They called it D-Day and they all went over there.
My 2 brothers were conscripted, and they went straight in very, very quickly, and both to the Far East. So that really, there was just the girls and my mother and father at home. They never talked very much when they come back, and not until my brother got really into his 80s. The only time he said something was, I think he went back to India, Burma, in his later life, in his 60s. And he said during the Battle of Kohima, his friend died in his arms. But no, they didn't. And it's not until you get older do you think back of what they went through, which they didn't ever speak about.
Uncle Charlie, who we were extremely fond of, my brother and I, he was very, very kind to us. He was married to my mother's sister. He always used to take us out when he was on leave and as best he could give us a good time. He was a real sweet, lovely man. He went down on the HMS Hood. And I've never, ever forgotten that. I'll never forget my Uncle Charlie. And another uncle, Uncle Eddie, he went into the army and he got captured by the Italians originally. But then when the Italians capitulated, he was transferred to the Germany, and he was a prisoner of war with the Germany for quite a long time, until the war ended virtually. Years later, we did try to get Eddie. I think Uncle Eddie, I think it affected him, you know, I think his brain was affected by the traumas that they'd been through for years. And we tried to get him drunk once to see if we could get him to tell his experiences, but no, he buried them so deep you just couldn't get them.
We got a signal to go to the frigate I was on, to go out to sea to intercept the ship, to maybe board it and bring it into Singapore. And I was part of the boat party and I thought it was great. I was only a young kid, only 19-year-old. But the job I got, I was at the front of the boat and I had to throw the line to get to this ship. Then they told me that these men were firing guns and everything. And my life jacket was armour proof. The good thing about these things now, because when people come here and they say, the kids that are brought up now are all brought up with mobile phones and computers, and they're modernised, you see it in all this machinery. When they see what happened during the Second World War, what the actual men fought with them, you think of the amount of people that were killed, and what they've got now. You see, and it's just letting people know that, you talk about, when they said Dunkirk, we actually got rescued all these army. They didn't mention there was a ship out there, one of the ships that rescued a lot, it sunk. and there was 5,000 people on that ship. Huh? Another one that showed you just recently, the evacuation of in the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, about Germany when they were evacuating their people from the Russian, and they were sunk by a Russian submarine. There was 9,500 families, women and children on that ship. You know, you can't you think about it. We didn't even lost. You never even lost that in the whole war, the Falkland Islands. See?
All war is misery. Nobody gains out of it, really. 1445 Commando was stationed in Malta, and I was in Malta just at the end, because I went there in the February, and Macarius signed the agreement in the April. So therefore, I never actually went to Cyprus, but they used to do 6 months about. In 1960, I think it was 1963, I went to Aden in 45 Commando, and that's when Aden blew up. And what it was all about, I really don't know. What the government was actually doing, putting servicemen in the situation that we was in, I really don't know. Because there didn't seem to be any point of what we were doing.